Hello, happy Saturday to you. Nikki here, and today I'm going to show you a card I made using the September subscription box from the Hedgehog Hollow. Now, these papers came in the kit. I cut one of the card bases into two pieces. We're going to use those for the card front, and I also used a piece of the gray cardstock as well. Now to start, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the stamp set called Beautiful Blooms add-on. I'm going to use the oval portion right here, and I'm going to stamp that directly down onto the white cardstock. I'm going to do this using a mini MISTI, so just in case I need to stamp it a second time, I won't have to worry about repositioning it exactly into the same place. So I'll go ahead and I'll pop my paper here into the mini MISTI and secure it down with the magnets so my paper will not move while I'm trying to stamp the oval. So I'll just place it down right here because it doesn't matter. Eventually I'm going to cut this out to go on the front of my card. So I'll just open this up here. We're going to ink it with the new Catherine Pooler shade. It's called Coral Cabana. This is a nice, bright, vibrant ink. I really love how this came out. I'm going to probably go ahead and stamp it twice just to make sure I get good coverage, because the first time I stamp, when I open this up, you'll see that it has a couple of little, I guess, ridges in the image. So I went ahead and double stamped it there. I did get a little overzealous when I was using the ink, so I got it all over my mini MISTI. But I'll go ahead and clean that up before I swap out and I stamp the flower images. You really want to make sure before you double stamp this, you want to just jog your paper over into the corner where it started, just to make sure that, you know, it hasn't shifted a little bit when you pulled it up from the first stamp. So mine was in the right place there, and you can see that I got much better coverage this time. So I'm going to go ahead and just clean up around the lid on the mini MISTI. Peel this off. I'm going to set it aside. I'll clean it up in just a minute. But I want to go ahead and stamp the floral image in the center of that oval. Now the floral image comes from another stamp set in that box. It's called Bountiful Blooms. It's this one right here. And it fits perfectly inside the oval, as you'll see in just a minute when I get this on the lid of my MISTI. So, but first I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't get this to match up as much as possible. Because I went and stamped the oval first, it's a lot easier to see where the outline of the floral stamp is going to go, as opposed to doing it the other way around. Now I'm going to stamp this in a gray ink, so it matches the gray cardstock that I'm going to use to matte the white portion of my card front. And I'm also going to use that same gray cardstock for the sentiment stamp that's going to go just over the lower right portion of the oval. So let me just get this straightened up here, and then I'm going to go ahead and ink it up. Now the gray ink I'm using today is from VersaFine. It's a VersaFine Clair, and it's in Morning Mist. And I really like it because even though it's a pigment ink, it tends to dry quickly to the touch, but you can still heat emboss with it even after it feels like it's dried. So you don't have to worry about smearing the ink on your project as you're working with it. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up the flowers here. Make sure I get a really good coating on there. And then I'm going to press it down into the space inside the oval. Hopefully I line this up really well. Just press it down to make sure I get all the ink transferred to the paper. And carefully open it up, and we're good. All right, so the next step is to color the flowers. So I'm going to pop it out of the mini MISTI here, and I'm going to set this aside for now. Now to color these flowers, I'm going to use the markers that came in the September kit as well. The markers are a part of the regular subscriber bonus that comes if you do subscribe regularly to the box. These particular markers, they are the brush tip coloring markers from Marbuchita, and these are really nice to color with. They are a water-based marker, so I'm going to go ahead and just grab the green here, and I'm going to start coloring in some of the leaves. And you don't need to go over the leaves very many times because these markers tend to lay down a lot of bright color. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in all these areas here. I'm going to do a lot of flicks with the flowers because I don't want to put too much color down, since the coral color of the oval is nice and bright. So I'm going to go ahead and put some music on here and finish coloring. I'm just finishing up with a couple of blue dots here through the center of the largest flower. And that'll take care of all the coloring that I want to do with those flowers today. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step where I want to cut out that oval, because that's going to be the piece that I'm going to overlay onto the other white portion of my card. I'm just going to use my big scissors for this, and I'm going to go ahead and trim this out. The next thing I want to work on is my sentiment strip. For this I'm going to use the gray cardstock. Now I want to have that as a mat for the white portion of my card. The oval is going to go here in the bottom third of the left hand side of my card panel. I'm going to move it over towards the edge. I'm going to trim the edge off there just to add a little bit of interest. The sentiment strip that I want to add on there, I'm going to be using the gray cardstock as well. I'm going to put it right here, but I didn't have an extra piece of this gray cardstock. So what I did is I went ahead and used a 2-inch square punch, and I punched a hole out of the center of the cardstock piece. So I can use the outer portion as the mat for my card, and I can use the inner square that I just trimmed out here to stamp and heat emboss my sentiment. Now to get going with this, I'm going to get an anti-static tool and give that a good dusting, because it does have some ridges in it and I don't want my embossing powder to get stuck in those ridges. I'm looking for nice clear words. I'm going to use the Nuvo Clear Mark embossing pad to stamp my sentiment, and it's going to be this one here, the Get Well Soon, which comes from the Bloom Where You're Planted set, which is also in the September kit. It fits perfectly on that little 2-inch square, but I'm not going to use the mini MISTI to stamp this time. I'm just going to use an acrylic block, since I probably only need to stamp this once, and I'll go ahead heat emboss it off camera, and we can just move on to the next part. But I'm going to stamp it right about there so I have room to trim off the edges. So here it is, all embossed. I'm just going to grab my trimmer here, and I'm going to trim it to about maybe a 1/2 inch wide. I'm going to use the silver portion of the trimmer to estimate where I have to cut that first. It should be right about here. There we go. And then I'm just going to flip it around and line it up against the edge of the silver blade again. And that should give me right about a 1/2 inch wide sentiment strip. There we go. So I'm going to gather all my pieces now because we're going to start putting the card together. But first I have to clean up my spot there. You can use one of those little rollers. They work really well for picking up any excess anti-static tool dust that you may have in your work area. So here is the other half of that card base that I trimmed at the beginning. I'm going to emboss it off camera with a Cuttlebug embossing folder called Oxford. It's a really nice pattern. It goes with everything. Next I'm going to trim the edges of this 1/8 off of each edge, just so the gray cardstock shows through around as the mat. So let me get my trimmer here, and I'll just clean up those edges really fast. Okay. And now I'm just going to gather all the pieces that we need to put together this card. All right, it's going to mat like that. Let me get some adhesive and we will start putting this together. The adhesive I'm using today is Tombow Extreme. Now this stuff is really sticky, as in measure twice and stick once, my friend, because you ain't getting it off once it's on there. So I'm going to be really careful as I'm laying this down to make sure all the edges are even. There we go. Make sure it's good and stuck. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead, add on my oval, and I'm going to use the extreme adhesive here too. You could use a foam square if you wanna, but I'm going to put the sentiment strip on with some foam squares in just a minute. So I thought I'd lay this one down flat against the background. Since I'm going to be cutting the edge off this, I only put adhesive on about 2/3 of it, so I wouldn't accidentally stick this to my table. Like I said, it doesn't come off. Okay, and I've got that right where I want it, so I'm going to stick that down. Make sure it's on there good and tight, and I plan on putting the sentiment strip right around here. So I'm going to grab some foam squares and get those put on. The ones I have today are from 3L. They are my favorite foam squares. I'm going to put 3 on here so it doesn't bow down in the center when I add it on. Get those release papers off, which I probably should use a pair of tweezers for that because I have like no nails. But I succeeded. So I'm going to go ahead and tap that down right there. Make sure it's adhered really well. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to trim off the edge of my oval. Okay, and there you have it. The last thing we need to do is put this onto a 5.5 by 4.25 inch white card base. And we are done. That's it for today. Links for everything I used to create this card are in the comments section below. Please like and subscribe for more card making and crafty goodness. Thanks for watching.